98% góra. Okay, so I just want to make that perfectly clear so you know what you're in for. Okay, right off the bat. You know, I'm always in awe of librarians and of archivists, because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be me. And I don't know that I can tell you much that you don't already know. But of course I will try to at least talk a little bit about my experience and the experience of what I hope is now being collected for future historians. Soon I won't be here. I'll be someplace else and not working anymore. But I'm hopeful that the future generations will continue to benefit from what you all are doing, which is very important stuff. This is the traditional view, right? Libraries and archives, and in the back room, piling up books. But libraries today are very different. There's the Mansueto Library at the University of Chicago, and it's an incredible retrieving system. I don't know if you've seen this thing, but it goes like at 15 or 20 miles per hour. It shoots down, pulls something out, brings it up 5 stories, and delivers it. And this is our Chinatown Museum in, I'm sorry, Chinatown Library in Chinatown in Chicago. So libraries are very different places. I'm kind of surprised that numbers are down, because really I think people go to libraries for things I never imagined before. Community meetings to coffee clutches to book clubs, all kinds of things. And they've become real community centers, especially I know in a place like Chicago. And university libraries have changed. Oh my God, how university libraries have changed since I was a graduate student. Coffee shops and places to talk and places to interact with other students. You know, you all scared me when you go shh like that when I was a kid, right? I do have one gripe with archivists and librarians: those gloves you make me wear when I'm in the archives. They bother the hell out of me. Okay, but outside of that, all right. Polonia, it's a contested definition. What is the Polish diaspora? What is the Polish migration? Who is the Polish migration? Who is Polish? Co to jest polskość? What does it mean to be a Pole? This was a question that divided Polonia in the 19th century, divided Polonia in the 20th century, and I think to an extent divides Polonia even today. What does it mean to be a Pole? And what is Polish America? How do we define what belongs in the historical record? That's a whole nother question, which is larger than Polonia, which is larger than any ethnic or interest group at all, right? How do we define what is important for the historical record? Archivists, you know, I sometimes wonder, archivists collect everything. Laundry lists, receipts. I go through archives at the Immigration History Archives collection up at the University of Minnesota, and there are, you know, laundry lists. You know, it's just amazing. But I guess it's to look at the larger picture and to put it in a larger framework. And all that is very important. But what is this? The problem of Poland. What is Poland? Right? Here's Poland, the historical Poland, right? The largest country in Europe at one point. Here is Poland today. Who is Polish? Is Lvov Polish? Is Lviv Polish? Is Vilnius Polish? Is Vilna Polish? These are big questions that we have to deal with. And we have to deal with it in the diaspora too, and when we think about collections and think about these kinds of issues. The Polish American diaspora, of course, is spread out throughout the United States, but these are the largest concentrations. Once again, in what we used to call the industrial belt, right? Now we call it the snow belt or the rust belt, right? And you are in the middle of it here in Milwaukee, right? Where you once had a stockyard is now a casino, right? So there's been tremendous changes going about. And of course, like other people, Poles have moved to the south and the west, and we do like warm weather just like everybody else, especially when we get over 67 years old, right? So there's been huge changes in how we define ourselves. Mieczysław Hyman, of course, the sort of saint of Polish American studies, who worked at the Polish Library and the Polish Museum, set down many of the parameters for the study in the early part of Polonia studies. And of course, the Polish Museum and Archives, a wonderful place, which is still located in the building it was born in, and where Hyman worked, and next to the museum, etc., and hopefully will be there for a good, long time, is sort of set the standard for the collection of Polish materials. But Polish materials are collected throughout the country and throughout all kinds of archives throughout the United States, and immigration materials also in Poland. Okay, Polish American Studies is the leading journal, as you all know, of the study of Poles, and the Polish Institute of Arts and Sciences, Polish Studies, and there are many books. In fact, hundreds of books that you can have in your collections. Here are just a handful of them, all right, that have come out in the last 20, 30 years. Kościuszko and Pulaski, right? These are the people that we all, that Polonia, the Zachlebem Polonia, the economic Polonia, the peasant Polonia, looked back to as sort of symbols of what we should strive for and how we can prove that we're as American as anybody else, right? And these early studies were important for this, and I know that they have several records at the library of Kościuszko's, and I don't think Pulaski, but Kościuszko's letters and so forth. But this was the economic migration, the largest migration, and this is the one that has been most studied, of course, and what most of the collections are deal with throughout the country. The Zachlebem, or for bread, or the economic migration, the peasant migration, which really went from the 1850s till the 1920s. It was a huge migration. At its peak in Chicago, there were over 60 Polish churches. Those are the Polish Catholic churches. Then there were Polish National Catholic churches as well, right? There was a Polish National Catholic cathedral as well in Chicago. And Chicago became this sort of center for Polonia. We like to call ourselves the capital of the Fourth Partition, you know, the stolica of the Fourth Partition. Right? Seeing here, St. Stanislaus Bishop and Martyr Church, Milwaukee. This is the huge church which looked down on you as you came in from the south. If you came in from the south, it still stands as one of the most impressive structures of Catholic Milwaukee. And overlooking the expressway, which thank God missed it by about 15 feet. Now, this happened also in St. Stanislaus Kostka in Chicago because of various Polish politicians. The Kennedy missed it by about 15 feet. But I do think that the priest could actually give out communion from the plebania, you know, through the window. If you're coming back from O'Hare Airport, you could just pass it out there. That, of course, is the mother church of Polish Chicago. And so these institutions are studied. There's some of these records are preserved in the Archdiocesan archives in Chicago. I was able to look up my father's 8th grade grades, right? And they were too good. I couldn't actually say anything nasty to him about it. You know, they were actually pretty good. But you could, all these records are in various archives in various places. The fraternals, of course, large collections. Once again, up in Minnesota. The Majewski papers are there, the Polish American Congress papers are there, various papers collections are up in Minnesota, but we also have these kinds of collections in Chicago, and you have, of course, wonderful collections here in Milwaukee. There's all kinds of fraternal organizations to take a look at. These are just a few, and I think that it's necessary. You know, for about 5 years, I worked with a group called the Southeast Chicago Historical Project. It was funded by the federal government through Columbia College, where I teach. And we were down in South Chicago, down by the steel mills. And there were 4 Polish parishes in South Chicago and various other parishes as well. And we were collecting historical materials. We ended up collecting 5,000 photographs. We did hundreds of hours of interviews on film and on cassette tape. We collected all kinds of other kinds of records, which we deposited with the Southeast Chicago Historical Museum. I'll show you their thing in a minute. It was really kind of interesting because people had all kinds of materials in their attic. And I spoke at more bingo games. The priest would give me 10 minutes before the bingo. And I would say, before you throw it in the shmieci, right? Let me take a look at it, right? Because Grandma's got a box up there. You know, she was vice president of something. We got to get out of here. We're going to throw it out. Bring it down here. Let me take a look at it. It ended up in the archives. These are kind of important things. There's all kinds of stuff out there. Photographs, memoirs, diaries, letters. Letters from Poland. My grandmother kept a whole stack of letters from Poland, in a box. One of those Góralski boxes, with all the cutout on the top of it. And there is the history of our family. So these are important things that not only books, not only film, not only records, but all those kinds of things are important to collect. And I hope if you don't collect them in your own libraries, you at least, encourage other people to collect them in archives around your cities, countries. Nuns. We've got to study nuns. They were just so important. This is a Felician sister, of course. They scared the hell out of me when I was there, but they're very important. Not only in the maintenance of Polskość, or, the idea of maintaining Polishness or ethnicity, but in the Americanization process, because they also brought these kids into the Americanization process. It was a very, very controversial thing in the community at the time, but they made them American as well as Polish. And I think the study of the various orders of sisters in this country was very neglected, as women have been generally neglected in the study of history and in the study of the church. This is something that we really, really have to focus on over time. Businesses. We have businesses everywhere, right? This is the most in-your-face Polish store in Chicago. It's absolutely incredible. For Polish kitsch, you can go in there and get hats and sweatshirts and whatever you like. But the idea of Polish American businesses, there was, I'm not sure if it's still being published, but a Polish American Yellow Pages in Chicago until just a few years ago. It was just hundreds of pages of Polish and Polish-oriented businesses. And this is true in places like Chicago, it's true in places like New York, it's true in places like Milwaukee. The study of businesses. And unfortunately, what has happened over time is small businesses have just had their records thrown away or disregarded. But this is telling us a vital part of our history. If you think of Polish neighborhoods, traditional Polish neighborhoods, like the south side of Milwaukee, you have at its base an economic symbolic base. That is something we don't control. Steel mill, packing house, factory, whatever. Above it is an institutional layer. Church, school, fraternal organization, street gangs. Lots of street gangs in Polonia. And they are worth studying. Okay. They were the sort of military arm of those old neighborhoods in many ways. Stores. Third places. Third places are places that you don't, and for those of us who've been married for some time, you don't have to look at your spouse, and you don't have to look at your boss. And in the Polish community, it's been mentioned many times, it's the tavern, right? The tavern, the saloon for men, and sometimes for women, but also coffee shops, places like that. My friend Ellen Scarrett said that the Catholic Church was the one place a woman can go who has 10 kids who words quiet. So her mother was in church all the time. Because that's true, right? Calm, quiet, weekly confession. Good for the soul and good for the blood pressure. Preservation of newspapers. The Polish American Genealogical Society, I don't know if you know this, but it is working with the Center for Research Libraries on the University of Chicago campus. The entire Jennings-Vinskowa is going to be online and searchable in the next year or 18 months, something like that. They're doing a fantastic job. Genealogists. Genealogists are a pain to librarians, right? They call all the time. They want to know this. They want to know that. They want to see this. They want to see that. You say, I don't have that. Well, can't you look again, right? Genealogists really get under the nerves of many librarians and archivists. But my God, have they pushed us to learn more and more and more about ourselves and to save more and more of the historical record. I just gave a talk at the Polish American Genealogical Society, and they were just, tremendously excited about new search engines, about libraries, about all these kinds of things. and making more and more of a connection with Poland itself. You know, if you go on, what is the big genealogy website? Ancestry.com. You really can't get Polish records, right? You can get Scottish, Irish, you know, English, but you really can't get Polish records on Ancestry.com of any importance. So you really have to start to think about how do we make these connections with Poland. And it's the genealogists that are pushing it. It's really, really very interesting. But newspapers, the preservation of Polish newspapers, and not just historical Polish newspapers, but Polish newspapers today, Polish American newspapers today, I think are very important. Politics. 3 Poles on an island, 6 political parties. It's an old tradition. And it has been forever. But this is a Polish Socialist Party candidate here in Milwaukee. Now, the question is, how do we really study politics, and how do we put it in a larger framework of the American of the American experience? Of course, we look at neighborhoods, and neighborhoods are the center of much of the study in Polonia. Neighborhoods, people interacting with each other, creating some sort of sense of community. What we have done as a people over time has created a sense of community, and that community is very much on a local level. I don't know about Milwaukee, but in Chicago, North Side Poles and South Side Poles don't get along. Is it the same in Milwaukee? Yeah. Now, I'm a South Side Pole. That's where we all settled on the South Side for the most part. And my grandmother would say to me, never date a North Side Polish girl. And I'd say, Babka, why? She'd say, they're all Germans and Russians, really. Only us on the South Side are real, Polish. Okay. She said to me, it would be better if you dated a Slovak, because at least they understand us. And it turns out half my family, I think, got drunk on a mountain, fell that way, and the other half fell that way, and so that's how we are on both sides of the Tatrate. But it's real interesting. And of course, this regionalism isn't just in Chicago, right? I mean, the regionalism in Poland was tremendous, especially in the 19th century. Oh, he's a Kujawiak. I'm a Góral. That makes me better, right? Or at least we thought so. People from Warsaw, well, la-di-da. Okay. So there was always this kind of friction, and in every wave was this friction. And what we need to do is to collect every wave, or we've lost a big part of our history. When the displaced persons came after the war, right? They spoke better Polish. We were talking about this earlier at lunch. And the Polish Americans who ran the Polish fraternals, there was friction. And then finally, that generation passed, and the displaced persons took over the fraternals, and then the solidarity came. And guess what? They spoke better Polish and different kind of Polish, right? And so there was a clash there too. It's common for different waves to clash, but there is one common connection, and that is our historical experience as Poles, whether we're Poles in America, or Poles in Australia, or Poles in Poland. I have one beef with Polish historians, and actually with American historians too. They don't take the immigration seriously. When you have these many million people leaving Poland in the 19th and 20th century, it has a tremendous impact on Polish society. Polish historians, generally speaking, disregard it. They say, yes, a lot of people went, but they were lost to the country. The real Poles stayed. But the Fourth Partition, if you saw that film, we gave back as much as we could. And we had a tremendous impact on American society, but also a tremendous impact on Polish society, and that continues with every wave. The raising of a Polish army in America, 28,000 men into Haller's army, going during World War I. Polish American labor leaders, like Emil Reeve, very important in Pennsylvania in the garment industry. In Chicago's steel industry, Eddie Sedlowski, very important, in organizing steel workers and organizing packing house workers and organizing people in all kinds of industries. Polonia was a working class migration for the most part. It struggled with those kinds of issues. Poles found themselves placed in a working class position whether they were educated or not. And they had to struggle with that. So that leadership is important. So what you have to do is you have to start thinking now about how do we incorporate labor history into Polish American history? How do we incorporate political history into, how do we show the impact we've had on America in general? And don't forget polka. I know people say, polka, Chopin. Not in my house. Polka was important. Polka was part of a unifying experience. Polka was something that made that Zachlebem migration come together and celebrate. And if you don't have fun, you're not Polish. I don't care what you think. You gotta have fun. You have to have a little piwo. I może troszeczkę wódka, you know? Just a little bit, maybe 2, 3, 4, whatever, you need. Okay? I just had a new book come out called Slaughterhouse. It's about the stockyards in Chicago. And the last bar on Whiskey Row, there were 40 bars in a row on Whiskey Row. They all faced the packing houses. And when the men would come out, they'd fill those bars up on their way home, you know. The last one is there. A woman named Wanda Kurek runs it. And she's 92 years old. Her father opened the bar in 1935. And we had a book signing there. And I figured maybe 10 or 20 people would show up. Over 200 people showed up. The place was packed. First time since the stockyards closed, I think. But it was packed. And so we just had a wedding. Not a wedding, I'm sorry. A birthday party for Wanda. She's not married. She's not going to get married now at 92. But anyway, those days have passed, gentlemen. But anyway, the place was packed again. It's just a celebration of... People came from Wisconsin. They came from Indiana. They came from all over the state of Illinois to be at Wanda's birthday party because her family had this kind of an impact. People have fun. And I always tell my students, they read that book, The Jungle, I says, what's wrong with this book? Nobody has any fun. If you didn't have fun, why did you come? Right? If you don't enjoy yourself, why would anybody come? There's jobs all over the place. You don't have to come to the Chicago stockyards. Look beyond the urban centers. This is a railway advertisement trying to get people to come out into farmlands. Look beyond the urban centers. Think about collecting those small Polonias. Stevens Point, right? All these little towns. We have Polish farmers in Wisconsin, Polish farmers in Connecticut, Polish farmers in Nebraska. You've got these places. And to collect that, because that's another part of Polonia that is totally ignored. You know, I'm sorry, most of the studies are about Chicago. Well, because it's the largest Polonia and that's where our archives are, right? But there's lots of little Polonias all around the country, and they should be looked into. And by the way, I'm very glad to be speaking here in the northern suburbs. That was from that other remark earlier. Okay. Polish Jews and other minorities. We've been separated for too long. It's time to think about them as part of our community as well, and to think of them as the interaction between communities. Jews lived in Poland for 800 years. Jews still live in Poland. Okay, the largest Holocaust museum, the largest Jewish museum in the world is in Warsaw right now. It's not a Holocaust museum. It's a celebration of Jewish identity. We've argued for too long. Okay, we've hated each other for too long, but we have interacted on a personal level throughout our history, including in the United States. Many of the stores in my neighborhood were Jewish stores. They were all Polish Jewish stores. I'd walk in, they'd talk to me in Polish because my grandmother talked Polish. So they talked to me in Polish, right? I mean, it was just that kind of an interaction that went on. Other minorities, we had someone here from Lithuania, right? A Lithuanian woman from Chicago. I think she's gone. Nationalism pulled the old republic apart as well. What we need to do is think about how those people interacted with each other for a while. I think there's someone here of half Polish and half Lithuanian descent, right? How did those two interact with each other over time? My argument here is to think of collecting for the larger experience, for putting Polonia in the larger picture of history, in the larger story of America, but also of Europe. There are many Polish scholars who are studying Polish migration. Anna Mazurkiewicz, Dorota Prasiłowicz, Paulina Napierała, Joanna Wojdon, and of course Adam Walaszek. And they are at the Institute of American Studies at the Jagiellonian, where I was privileged to teach for a year. Mazurkiewicz is in Gdańsk, and Wojdon is in Wrocław. But there's lots of interest in Poland now, a growing interest in the migration. And of course we have Polish American scholars like Erdmans and Bukowczyk and Kirkman and Biskupski and some guy over there, I don't know his name. You know. And the importance of this is to bring this story to a larger public. Polonia Today. Don't forget Polonia Today. You have the incredible opportunity to collect stuff today that has never been collected before. Polonia Today. Dwie ojczyzny, jedno serce. Huh? Two fatherlands, two motherlands, one heart. Okay. There is a tremendous amount of stuff to be collected today and to be maintained. I'm just giving you more work. That's what historians do to librarians. You know, you think the genealogists are bad. Lots of different kinds of organizations like this one. Polish language classes at the university level. Here, Eastern Michigan, University of Illinois at Chicago, all kinds of things going on. And of course there is our Taste of Polonia at the Copernicus Center, right? And other kinds of organizations. Polish American Society. Jim Pula and that other historian who I can never remember his name, sitting down on the side, right? Now, lots of different organizations collect Polish materials. Wisconsin State Historical Society has lots of materials on Chicago Polonia. Southeast Chicago is a local neighborhood organization which has thousands of photographs of Polonia online. Not online, but in their archives. The Illinois Historical Society. Something I think that's been important and has just popped up, and I don't know if those of you from Chicago are familiar with this, but the Chicago Collections Consortium is something I hope the Polish Museum will eventually join. It is a tremendous sharing opportunity for most of the major libraries, academic libraries and public libraries in the city of Chicago. So for instance, you could go to this website, it's called Chicago Collections, go to the website, you can punch in Polish materials, photographs will come up, and so will all the collections held in major academic libraries. So that anybody who's doing research, someone comes to your library and says, where do I find stuff on the Polish democratic organizations? Punch it in there. It'll tell you to go to the University of Illinois at Chicago. Or it'll tell you if you're punching in something on oral history to go to the Chicago History Museum and talk about it. So this is a very important website. Just it's chicagocollections.org. And it's something brand new. We just started it in October. It is Columbia College is part of this, Northwestern, University of Chicago, Loyola, DePaul, UIC, are all part of this. IIT, some small neighborhood collections are also now collected with this. This is a way to widen your scope. Look, you guys are in libraries and you have a limited amount of space. You were saying earlier that you're about to explode, right? We have something called iShare. I'm sure you have the same thing here in Wisconsin. iShare, we are connected with 82 libraries. If you're looking for a book, you go on iShare, and 82 university libraries are connected with each other. You can do these kinds of things. Libraries are bigger, better, and more important than they ever have been before. There is no reason to be pessimistic about this, despite the fact that governments don't understand this, and that governments are being silly and stupid, because when they cut the libraries down, they also cut universities down, and they cut higher education down, and they cut the future down. And that's something we got to organize as a people, not just as librarians or historians, to fight, because we are losing the future through all these cuts, and they're unnecessary. Thank you.